that, right? Like how much the marks as a set create density of mark making, right? So that's an important thing about, and I think we can all sort of agree, just having looked over, we probably could have pushed ourselves more to explore more things that could happen when you increase the density of your mark making. Okay, what else? We covered a bunch. We're doing good. Yes. Tone. Okay, well that relates to value, right? But there is another point to make about value, which is value can also relate to pressure. I kind of hinted at it when I was talking about your two different Sharpies, right? But also, especially like with your pencil, right? You can, with a graphite pencil, you can work really, really light and have very, very light tone, right? Light value. And then you could also work really, really hard, right? And have a much denser, darker mark, right? So we call that weight. Right? And when we get to the line unit, we're going to talk about line weight a lot. Okay? What else? So we got that under value. We'll put value, we'll also put tone and pressure and weight. Okay, they're all kind of related. More. Say it again. Texture, right? Okay. That has to do more with like what the marks create, but we're going to get to that. But let's talk just for a second about that before we go further. When we say, okay, we're making our mark making systems, right? And we say that some really are interesting textures. What do we mean by that? Like, okay, to give you an example, right? Okay, so we got this and this, and I'm going to make another one that's going to be okay, and now look at this next one. And so these both, to a degree, seem to have a little bit more texture than that, right? But then this next one, okay, would everyone agree that this one seems to have more texture than these two? Right? You know, like something about it. So what is it about that arrangement of marks that creates more of an impression of texture? And what do we mean by that when we say, right? Because any kind of patterning of marks is in a way a visual texture. But some visual textures seem to reference an actual texture. Right? Can anyone tell me what the secret is to this one? I did a little cheat. What is it? What's the cheat that I did that makes it feel more like a representation of an actual texture?
Like a weaving basket. Like a weave basket.
Right, yeah. But the point I'm trying to make is like, what's the difference between this and this? It's a subtle little thing that I did that was different between the two of them. I did, right? I made certain lines darker, and what does that do? It adds an emphasis, right? And it creates the implication of a cast shadow, doesn't it? Right? Like the idea that then one weave is overlapping another weave. Does everyone see that? Right? The difference from that to that? I mean, this one still feels more textural than these two, right? But that one, and I was cheating, right? You know, using a trick. I'm sorry. I shouldn't do that. But I wanted to make a point. Okay, so texture is very good, but it's not gonna be on this list because I wanna think more specifically about individual marks, how they can vary. Did you say direction? Excellent. Okay, so let's pause for a second. Because it's like, this is one of the things that's hard about learning designs, because you have to look at the things that you already know and really analyze them carefully, right? The word, direction, when it comes to marks and lines, is so obvious, right? That we think, well, that can't possibly be one of the answers, but it's an incredibly important answer, right? One of the things you should do after I'm done talking here for a while is you should look back over your things and say, did I try really hard to make sure I had all kinds of directions of marks going on? Like, and because it's so easy to be like, okay, I got verticals, I got horizontals, roughly, right? And I got some diagonals, but the human arm is so much more naturally inclined to make these diagonals than these diagonals. These practically hurt your shoulder when diagonals going this way, right? These diagonals are easy. So you're probably gonna have a lot more diagonals going this way. And you'll also probably notice that like 90% of your diagonals will probably be in a 45-degree angle, right? Have you really thought about it? What about if it's just shaved off a little bit or shaved off a little bit more, right? Or similarly, what's the difference between a line that's kind of horizontal versus getting out a straight edge and measuring it, making a perfectly horizontal line, right? There's subtle differences between those. So direction is key, it's really important. Okay, what else? Remember we had talked about this and that. What are some of the differences between those?
Line started one curve.
Right? Yeah, okay. Oh, and then what's the difference between this and that? Like, I would argue that these two are more similar to each other than that one is, right? Right? Like, we would probably, as a group, like you as a group would probably flip it and say, this one and that one are more similar, and that one is different because it's a real line, it's a straight line, right? But I would say these two are more similar to each other. Why would I say that? Because I'm crazy? Maybe. Because I come up with random opinions just on the spot.
They have like the same form, kind of?
Yeah, I mean, they're kind of similar in terms of their length, and they're very similar in terms of the organization of their angle, right? Overall like that, but then that one's pretty much the same as that. My argument would be that a really important issue, and this is true about shapes and lines and all marks, is regularity, right? Right? Well, we tend to, like, when we get to shapes, right, a lot of people think of like, well, there's geometric shapes, and then there's, organic shapes, and then there's just random shapes, right? But I would say it's much more of a spectrum, right? Which is, there are regular shapes, and then there are irregular shapes. And the most regular shapes are the geometric shapes, right? Like, if something can be described mathematically, right? Like a perfect arc, or a perfect circular curve, even if it's not all the way around as a circle, if it can be described by math, then by definition, it's extremely regular, right? Meaning that when you look at the thing, you can see the rule of the thing. And in fact, if you look at a part of the thing, you know the rule of the whole of the thing, often. Like some parabolic curves might be confusing, but basically, by eye, we can see what is the rule of this and what is the rule of that. Whereas irregular things, right, they're irregular. They're hard to pin down as to the rule. We could go way more irregular than that. Right? And we could keep pushing ourselves. So here's a question to ask yourself. How much did the stuff that you make, how much did it depend on very regular mark making, and how much could you push yourself when it comes to irregular mark making? People tend to, like on the first day of design class, people tend to stick with regular mark making as much as possible because it looks neater, right? It's like more what you expect is going to please a teacher, right? Who here has an experience of being like, in first or second grade and drawing a triangle that looks like that and having your teacher go, wow, that is the most expressive triangle I've ever seen. You're a genius. Instead, you probably have your teacher go, no, do it again. It's not right. It needs to have 3 lines, 3 sides. It needs to be a triangle, right? So, and then of course, what the teacher wants you to do is something close to an equilateral triangle with the bottom part flat, right? Even if you did a perfect triangle, but you did a triangle like this, you'd probably get like, sort of like, well, okay, yes, technically that's a triangle, young lady, but that's not what we're doing here today. We're not here to prove that we're super smart. Just draw the triangle, right? So we get tons of feedback going from even before kindergarten, right? That regularity and simple, clean organization is automatically preferred. So it's certainly natural that many of you were biased towards that when it came to the mark making system that you came up with, right?